This video is an interview with my friend Mike Hughes on one of the most controversial claims of explorer and archaeologist Ron Wyatt. Ron's claim was that he had discovered the Ark of the Covenant after digging for roughly a decade in Israel. He had gone into a chamber underneath the actual crucifixion site of Jesus Christ and discovered the Ark of the Covenant. Then it was claimed that the Ark of the Covenant was taken into Israeli custody where, if Ron's claims are true, it would remain today. And as wild as that account sounds, Mike Hughes is one of the people that was closely involved with these events. And I wanted to do an interview with him to lay down as much as he could share. It's a full-length interview on what actually happened surrounding Ron Wyatt claiming to have found the Ark of the Covenant. I think you're going to enjoy it.
The only things I can verify are things that I saw personally and what we did personally. So this is not a story, it's what we've really seen. This is not a secondhand thing. All right, so met with Richard and Marinell, looked at various different artifacts and things they had found. We went to the Museum of Israel and looked at it's a little pomegranate that Ron found. That the Ministry of Antiquities themselves say that this was something that was hanging on the garment of the priest in the temple. That's a pretty big thing to find.
Right.
Now I can tell you what Ron had said after he presented this artifact, real artifact.
This is a part of the priest's garment.
That's right. It's part of the priest's garment.
High priest garment.
The high priest garment, right?
Right.
And Ron had said, I gave this to so-and-so with the Ministry of Antiquities with Jerusalem, who's kind of a paramilitary organization, said, hey, by the way, remember that dig I'm doing? Look at this. And then immediately they locked him up. Now, what I mean by that is they said, okay, we're going to take over from here.
Yeah.
All right, so initially...
It's our dig.
That's right. So initially, when I'm meeting with Richard and Marinell, they're giving me this story. We're in the Americas at that point.
Yeah.
We didn't go back to Jerusalem again yet. And I said, let's just do this. Okay. We fly out there. We believe we have an idea of where the Ark of the Covenant was hidden. We drew maps. We made a plan. We got. I arranged for a ground scanning radar and team to be there with us. We had over 30 or 40 volunteers with us because we intended to start excavating. So that's how convinced I was that these guys have found some stuff. He's got an artifact in his hand, and that's completely verified. So it's not, Now that thing, by the way, is stated as the discoverer was anonymous. They don't want to say that he was the one who found it. All right, so roughly 50, 60 people fly back. We go to Jerusalem, organize, get everybody together. Now here's the story. All right, so the story goes like this, that I can say makes sense based on what we saw.
This is the full-length version of that interview. I thought this was important to put up. I put a few clips at the onset of it. This again is my friend Mike Hughes, and I hope you enjoy this roughly hour-long interview on the Ark of the Covenant and the events that occurred with Ron Wyatt. Mike, you worked on one of the questions a lot of people ask about is the Ark of the Covenant, and there were claims that Ron Wyatt had actually entered a chamber, and what he believed, this was one of the great... Now, Ron Wyatt found a lot of things that are in your hand that you can verify. You were within the groups of people that examined his claim about the Ark of the Covenant. And the claim, if I understand it, was something to the effect of that he entered a chamber, and within that chamber he saw the Ark of the Covenant was in there. This was in Israel. And where he had been digging was a spot where his arm had just gone out. And he pointed and he said, and the word just came out of his mouth, that's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there. Part of the philosophy behind that was that in in the days of when the king of Babylon took over, Nebuchadnezzar took over Israel. He surrounded Israel to starve them out.
685 BC, something like that.
And that no one escaped. They certainly would have noticed somebody leaving with a giant gold box. And that the priests, and the last priest would have been Jeremiah, that they frantically hid these artifacts in the tunnels underneath Jerusalem. And that when Jeremiah died and everyone else in Israel died, there was no one left that knew where that Ark of the Covenant was. And that Nebuchadnezzar kept meticulous records, or his father kept meticulous records.
It's not in the inventory.
Right, and it's not in the inventory of what was there. Now, Ron's story went on to claim that this chamber was underneath of where Golgotha is, or the place of the skull that literally looks like a skull, that there was a chamber under there. And that when the earthquake happened and the ground split, that blood came down the cross, went in and dripped on the mercy seat, which was an absolutely beautiful story.
Amazing story.
Can you tell us about your investigation? You knew these people.
Yeah.
Can you? And I don't know how much of that might be incorrect. Can you tell us what you know about the Ark of the Covenant?
Okay, so I started an organization a long time ago called InSearch, and this is in the 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s. And the purpose of InSearch was, let's say if you were a discoverer or a researcher or whatever, and you have this amazing artifact, this holy cow thing, right? And you've been looking for this for years. A type of person like that has this thing in their head that they're just driven to find it. That's like Ron Wyatt for a lot of these artifacts. So I thought there was a need for a service to document a discovery as it happens. Or let's research and back into the discovery and go to that site and see if I can verify anything that the claims were. And I started doing that. So I worked with the Wyatts, a bunch of different people too, the shipwrecks and stuff like that. So I worked with the Wyatts, and Mary Nell is Ron's widow. Okay? And then Richard Reeves, super cool people, by the way. And his two sons, just really, really neat people. So we went to verify the discovery of Sodom, Gomorrah, Azimuth, and Zeboim. Look at the site. Test the materials, test the area, survey it, bring survey equipment. We did all that stuff. And at the same time, they said, hey, let's come back and talk about the Ark of the Covenant and the discovery that was allegedly made by Ron Wyatt. Roughly 50, 60 people fly back. We go to Jerusalem, organize, get everybody together. Now here's the story. All right, so the story goes like this, that I can say makes sense based on what we saw.
Okay.
All right, so here you are in the 6th century BC, and there's this box that you've got, and you're the priest, and the place is surrounded by Nebuchadnezzar's team. You can't get out, you can't get in, and you want to hide your stuff, including the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Right.
So can you even get outside the city? Yes. How would you do that, even though it's under siege? Okay, so here's the storyline. When Solomon's dad assembled all the materials to build the temple in the first place, he dug directly into the stone underneath where the temple is now, and quarried out the stone, the really nice stone, to build Solomon's temple in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? So let's imagine that you're quarrying out this stone, and there's what's called the Great Room, where you've got most of the really cool stone. And as you get to the edges of where you're quarrying, you go, I'm not getting that great a stone, but there's a good vein here. Let's go this way. And then you run out there, and then you go, well, let's go that way. And I find a good vein here, and you do. And then pretty soon, it's not just a great room, but it's a bunch of fingers going, so it becomes what you'd call the catacombs.
Yeah.
These are called Solomon's quarries, right? It wasn't for Solomon, it's for his temple. So Solomon's dad is the one who assembled and put all the building materials together, and then his son is the one who had it built. Pretty amazing. Okay, so working with the Ministry of Antiquities and their lead archaeologist, that the Wyatts had developed and Ron particularly had developed a terrific relationship with and trust. He's not going to run off with anything. He's going to do what he says and do it efficiently and leave. And he'd been doing things, Ron, for actually a number of years. So we go down into, with our team, into Solomon's Quarries, and we had plain-dressed military escorts to block off the entrance to Solomon's Quarries so we don't get any people that don't want us there messing around, because there's a bunch of us down there. And we go down into the quarries, and let's say you're going down that into the quarries, you get to where you're approaching the great room. You're not there yet, and it's like the first left. Right? You go down that one.
Right.
So we go to that one of the fingers to the far left, and then Richard and I says, okay, now look at this. And so we're going down this one finger, and remember, this is a stone quarry. What are you going to find? Just stone.
Stone.
Right? All right, so we go down the finger, I'd say the length of this room at the very most.
Okay.
And then Richard said, okay, now take a look at this. Remember what I showed you at the museum? So we get to the edge of the cave, and there's this place that was cut out where somebody had carved an angel.
Yeah.
Now, why would they do that? So the theory is this. The high priests are saying, we got to hide our stuff. So the theory is they went down into Solomon's Quarries, went down one of the fingers, put it in the end of one of the tunnels, backed up, covered it up, backed up again, made a fortified wall to defend it with bow slits facing the direction that you would go down the tunnel.
Yeah.
To defend it, and then waited. And if they were successful to defend themselves, they could just go get the stuff. But if they lost, no one would know it was there. Okay? Well, I have to verify that going down that finger, all of a sudden, you go another few yards, and there's a big pile of dirt.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is dirt doing in the middle of a stone quarry? Well, of course, dirt in a stone tunnel is going to have a top. So you kind of shimmy up to the very top and get between the stone and the dirt, and sure enough, the other side, the cave continues. So we went down that, and then you get to a man-made wall with bow slits as a defense position, where the slits are made to be shooting at me coming this direction.
Yeah.
So they have a block, and then the second defense is you get over that, you're there. Very clever, because you can only get through that dirt one at a time. They could easily pick people off as they. It's clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
This doesn't seem accidental to me. So there's a mark of which tunnel to go. There's a defense position. And remember when you and I were in Egypt?
Yeah.
And the entrance to the Zoser complex?
Right,
Where,
the thin hallway. Right.
Yeah, perfect defense. And you and I talked about it. This is a perfect defensive door, because you can only get one guy through it at a time, and it's like 20 feet deep. And how are you ever going to storm that, right?
Yeah.
Stone doorway, really narrow. Okay. So we get beyond that, and there's more dirt at the other end. So we got an approval, which was unheard of, to say, we're going to get rid of this dirt.
Okay.
And so we got rid of enough dirt to get to the back so our guys can go up and down and then through to the other side and start removing literally tons of dirt, bucketfuls at a time, with our 30 or 40 volunteers. And we're there days doing that. In fact,
You were there, Mike.
I was there. I was
there.
part of the team. We found pottery. We found all sorts of interesting things that date back to the correct time. And I got pictures of that. I'll give you a picture of that.
Okay.
So the design of the pottery and the type in this, it's not just us, but it's the archaeologist that was the lead archaeologist for Jerusalem at the time verified that the markings on this pottery match the time that this would have happened. I think that's significant.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to the.
So this is possible, Mike. That he found
so far, it's completely plausible.
Yeah.
All this makes sense.
Now,
What
I
did you defend
had
yourself
doubts
against?
about it. I don't mean to interrupt your story,
Yeah.
but it sounds like where you're going with this is you believe it's possible he found it.
Absolutely. Okay, so we dig and dig and dig, and we finally get to a wall that was man-made, and we expose a big section of wall. If you want to shoot the camera at the bed here, that was about this size, twice the length this direction, where the dirt was up here, and now it's down to about right here, and we get to the foundation of a man-made wall with a footer that dates, the archaeologist says, this is a 600 BC wall. I don't know how he knows that, but somehow he's a smart guy, he knows that. So that's pretty good. So, we said, we're going to ground scan this, and we're going to survey where this was.
Okay.
He is outside of the city. So I found that I am 45 feet below grade. Directly above me is basically the road to Damascus, which is outside the city gates. I'm outside the city gates, adjacent to the Damascus entrance, right? And I am nearing what you would call going towards where they used to store the buses, okay, for the city. I mean, currently, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then the archaeologist had said, I wonder where this goes. And he said, we'll let you keep going, but you can't touch this wall. This is now an artifact. So they let us assemble wood and construction equipment and everything and tunnel underneath the footer to get to the other side, because when we ground scanned it, we could see the tunnel continue.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, that's going to take time. So we went back up to grade, surveyed and knew exactly where we were underground. I had surveyors. And then we used the ground scanning radar and went all the way across the road to Damascus, over the bush, led right to underneath where Ron was digging, where he found a cross hole. Okay,
Yeah.
so, right. This cave, I was able to verify with the ground scanning radar that it went in the right area where Ron had also found and dug down what he would call a cross hole and plug.
Right.
And what is that? Okay, so let's say you're going to kill somebody on a stick or a cross, or what are we going to kill them? Well, everything's kind of stone there. So what they would do is, the ground is basically a bunch of stone, and they carved out a hole that was about that big square and about that deep. And then they put a plug in it, so if it rains and mud, it won't fill up. So we're going to kill a guy, you pull the plug, stick the post in it, kill the guy.
Stick the cross in.
But this one has a crack going right through the middle of it. Like
Yeah.
an earthquake.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because
Yeah.
you saw, they wanted to get rid of that evidence.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah,
that?
They did when I was at the. That's over by the Garden Tomb.
Right.
It's in there. They would not tell it was actually the gardener. There might have been an angel, and it was actually Rick Geringer that was running loose. They said that these were conspiracy theories. They didn't exist at the Garden Tomb of Jesus. The Catholics that are there.
Well, you and I were talking on the phone. I said, look for an old guy.
Yes, that's funny. I was on the phone with you, Mike, and the gardener came over and he said, "Here's the thing," and even the crosshole plug was there. We had that on film. So you were somewhere underneath that.
I saw it. I was
So,
there.
this is the first time you told me this story.
Yeah,
in this
it's
way.
pretty amazing that this
Yeah.
tunnel.
In this way.
Exactly. This tunnel led exactly to that same spot. That's amazing.
So do you think that tunnel was, is that tunnel what they used to get the ark out from underneath there when Nebuchadnezzar put siege on?
Well, that would be okay, so remember, you're 45 feet
Yeah.
below, but your grade as you're tunneling may
Come up.
come up, because at that point the crosshole plug is about 15 to 20 feet below grade.
Right.
So if I went to, back then, see, that had been all excavated by the time you went back. But when I was there with the team, we went right to the hole, and there's his stuff, and even his electric, what do you call it, jackhammer was still down in the hole. Yeah.
Oh, you found his jackhammer?
Yeah, it was
down there?
right still there.
So you knew where he was.
I knew exactly where it was. It was there.
See, the way this was portrayed to a lot of people is that he wasn't really digging anywhere. So you're stating when you went down that tunnel. Okay, so that tunnel begins sort of out there by the Garden Tomb area somewhere that he was crawling in. Is that okay? So now when you go in that tunnel where Ron was, are there lots of different directions you could go? Okay, so this is expansive. Once he was underground, you've got expansive areas. You're
Yeah.
going off this way and that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there is an area that you can get to underneath there where it's kind of really skinny or narrow.
Yeah.
So what he's trying to do is access where this tunnel was going from a different direction.
Right.
And he had to have been led by something not human.
Why do you say that?
Well, because what would lead him to find the precise place before I was there years later ground scanning radar and finding that is where the tunnel went? He would have had no idea about that.
He wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
He didn't have the equipment.
Yeah.
He didn't have the equipment. But for some reason, he knew where to dig. Now, part of the reason is, and they told me this is pretty interesting. So, you've been to the Garden Tomb, right?
Yes.
All right, so let's say this is the wall to the Garden Tomb,
Okay.
and you're standing back and you're looking at it, and let's say that's to the left of the doorway, which is only about this high, right?
Right.
Okay, and then there's a little hole up here. It's a vent hole because it's got a vent, okay? And if you went in the Garden Tomb this way, there's a keeping room over here, right? And where he was buried, not literally buried, is it? Was right there. He's like laid right there. And there's a track built, carved
For the
into the
stone.
stone,
Yeah.
where they rolled a stone, okay, to cover it. Richard had been there and had already ground scanned the whole area and discovered the pin that they used to secure the stone so no one can open it. And he verified that. Right like over here. So here's the door. And remember how tall the door was, right? So think of the circumference of the stone and the width of the stone, because the track, that's a pretty big stone. All right. How would you secure something back then? The same way they built the Colosseum. You would drill a hole into the stone, through the stone into the wall, okay? And then you actually stick a spike in it, iron, and then what you do is you pour the thing with this little tool, you pour hot lead into it. That's exactly how they made the connections in the Colosseum for the stones. Well, guess what? Richard found the pin with the core pin of iron, and based on its metallurgy, it matches the date and time, and also the lead around it. And that was what was used to secure the stone. If you read the testimonies closely about what the angel did, it doesn't actually say the angel rolled the stone away. It said he threw it away. Okay, so if you're the guards, right, and this guy goes, boop, you know, you're gonna like say, all right, well, I'm kind of done here, let's go.
Right.
Because the angel threw it out of the way. This is kind of a substantially different thing to me, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now here's another thing I thought was interesting. When you get to the very far back of the Garden Tomb vault, right? This is a wealthy man's tomb. You're in Joseph's sort of garden, because there was grapes and everything being grown there as well, and it matches Joseph,
Yeah.
who had that land. See, these things to me go together and make a lot of sense, right? Okay, so Richard and I said, Richard said, we need to see what's on the other side of this wall. So we made an appointment with a monk, because if you look at that wall and you look up high, I'd say 15 feet or something, there's a fence.
Right. You're talking above the Garden Tomb. You go over.
Right,
and
you know
come
what's
to the
over
other
that
side.
fence? Well, the grade actually is about the height of this, and then there's a fence on top of that. Well, there's a monastery or a priest house or whatever you call that thing up there about a few yards. Interesting.
Yeah.
So we went there, and so we had an appointment with a priest, a Catholic temple priest up there, right? And we said, all right. We know there's some tombs underground below this place here. Can you take us there? He goes, not sure I know what you're talking about. And we asked him 2-3 times, I don't know. And then Richard said, we want to contribute something to your church and have you bring it to your officials. And he goes, the tunnels. Oh, right. And absolutely, that's what happened. He says, okay. And we did a little something. And he showed up the next morning, absolutely sure. He actually had a Grateful Dead t-shirt on, which is fun. All right, so we met with him, and he showed us the secret passage to get to the tunnels underground.
Yeah.
Now, So we get into these catacombs over there, and those are also wealthy tombs, but they were there to bury kings.
Mm-hmm.
And each of the doorway to those tombs are in exact Royal Egyptian cubit dimensions, which is 22.93 inches, I think, is a Royal Egyptian cubit. There was preparation rooms, keeping rooms, and burial places.
Mm-hmm.
And where they would bury kings or high officials, that was the spot over there. And I'll give you pictures of this. Okay, we put it on the video. There's a spot where, in each of these special tombs, underneath their church, right, are these beds that are about this high.
Yeah.
Right, and a little spot here where you could see a shape where the guy's head would be and neck. So you lay the guy on it, he sit, and in the middle of that is a hole about that big around. And so I asked the priest, I said, "What's this hole?" He said, "Over the centuries, after the guy turns to, a bunch of stuff, you break him into pieces and drop it down that hole." And I said, "But each one of these have that." He says, "You're going to be amazed. All these holes lead to one spot." And I don't know how in the world they would have done that. I took my camera and went, said, "Look, see, I film down there, right?" And I said, where do all the bones go? He says, "I'll show you." So we went down this makeshift ladder to a lower space, and there's a vault room that looks like a fireplace mantle and an opening, and all these bones. We surveyed it. It's right on the other side of the wall to the garden tomb.
Yeah.
We're literally just a few feet away. And there's a prophecy that says, "You have littered my grave with the bones of your dead kings."
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know where they got that prophecy, but that's what we talked about then.
Yeah.
And it's a fact. And I touched some of the bones just
Yeah.
because it'd be, wow, this is pretty sacred. I go, look at that. Right? And actually there was this tarantula in there, which is actually real. It's on film. Yeah.
Right.
So I went, okay.
I'm leaving that alone.
I think that's good.
That's good. Yeah, soon enough.
Yeah. But they were all broken up and stuff, and these are thousands of years of dead guys, right there in this kind of fireplace.
Room on the other side of the
That's
garden
right.
tomb. So where
Yeah.
Jesus was laying for 3 days, right on the other side of the wall behind it. If you're in there's a room full of dead kings.
Yeah, dead bones, and
dead
then
kings.
the opening of which is this direction.
Right.
So it's back to back with that tomb. I like how these things match.
So the underneath. So to give somebody okay. So I've got two questions for you. So the underneath out there, when you guys were looking around, it's literally like a weavework of tunnels underneath the ground. Many of them unexplored, and many of them even sealed off. Is that kind of the way it is?
Some did collapse over time.
Okay, so the room. Okay, so the criticism about Ron's Okay, so it's stated that that Ron, let's just phrase it for the sake of argument, believed that he had found the Ark of the Covenant.
A room with the Ark of the Covenant that he was able to sort of get a photograph with, and he also used an authorscope to get through the cracks and take a photograph. That's how I heard it with the group of people I was with as we were discussing this.
Okay, so now he went to the antiquities authorities following this.
He went back to the guy and said, "Look what I
Okay.
found."
Okay, so what happened? So the story there is that they locked the area off.
They did.
When they sent Ron home. Now that's substantial if that's what happened.
Okay, this is exactly what happened. All
Okay,
right,
go
so
ahead. So he comes back and he does literally, because this is what he went home and told everybody.
Well,
He
yeah,
went
I
home
was
and
there
he
and they
told
verified it.
everybody, "I have found." See, because you're going to look like a crazy person coming back with this story.
Absolutely.
So he goes directly home to all the Christians that have supported him in all the different places and says, "I found the Ark of the Covenant." That's literally what he did. And then following this, Israel, and they're going to release it. You're going to find out what we found and all of this. But I have been in a room with the Ark of the Covenant, and I told my Israeli people. Shortly after this, the Israeli people are denying they even know Ron. Is that
That's
true?
right. All of a sudden we don't really know that guy,
Never heard of it.
But it gets a little bit deeper than that too.
I mean, if you were lying, this would destroy your credibility
That's
right
right.
there.
That's
And you
right.
would know that if you were Ron.
And you could
Go
verify
ahead.
that never happened.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so
So that feeds into what we were just discussing before we went online.
Mm-hmm.
Is that thing's going to turn up?
it appears it may. It appears it may.
Because they have it.
Well, yeah, because that's like a little goofy that they went in
Exactly.
and destroyed that area, so you don't
So you
actually see
can't
the
get
evidence of the cross hole and all that. It's all been excavated out. I mean, it took quite a few yards of dirt and everything. But okay, so one of the times we were there.
Did they seal off that area? To
Oh
the
yeah,
best of your
I
knowledge,
wasn't there when it was sealed off. Remember, that was
What
Ron.
happens next, in the best of your knowledge, when Ron goes and tells the authorities?
Oh, I know exactly because I was
Okay.
there when they were all talking about it.
Okay.
So some of the guys involved with that whole Ministry of Antiquities and all the people that Ron would address if he found something.
Yeah.
They were in one of the. There's a what is it? YMCA hotel, right? That a bunch of us stayed at, has a pool in and stuff, and it's this big tower of a hotel that's not
Okay.
far. You probably know where that is. And they have this neat little meeting room in there, and we were all hanging out. There's about 6 or 7 or 8 of us. Ron's widow, Marinelle, was there. Richard was there. These Israeli guys were there, and I was there, and we were all talking about stuff. And they were going, "Yeah, remember when Ron found that?" And yeah, and she was saying, "I just remember how he's all excited about it." And he took it over to so and so, and said, "Look," and that story is verified. I heard them talking about it and amongst themselves. So the guy said, "Okay, well, we'll take it from here, Ron." Right?
Yeah.
And then they said, "By the way, you can't just leave. We want you to go right to your hotel. I'll give you a ride, and we'll take you back to the hotel. And you
Okay.
need to stay there."
Okay. So
Okay.
this is what happens directly following allegedly finding the Ark of the Covenant. So they take him to his hotel, and he's going to stay
Now
there.
he stays there.
Okay.
Then what happened is, let me remember how the chain went. Yeah, so he's in his hotel for a few hours. Then he gets a phone call from the same guy that said, "Okay, stop." Now, when he told the guy what he found, that's when he gave that artifact to this man. And
Okay.
that's when the man said, "Okay, we're going to seal this off." A few hours go by. It's, I think, nighttime by then.
This is a part of the high priest's outfit.
Right. He
That he
said,
had.
yeah,
Yeah.
he said, "Okay, Ron, we need your help here." He says, "Well, what do you need to do?" Now, this is Marinelle conveying what Ron had told her on the phone to the people they're discussing this.
Yeah.
And they said, "Yeah, that's when we found those dead bodies." And I'm going, "Where's the dead body?" He said, "Well, what happened was," and they said, "Okay, so military man goes in there, seals the place off, says, 'All right, go down this and shimmy in here,' and he had 2 officers go down in there and then wouldn't respond. And they called and wouldn't respond. So the other guy says, "I ain't going down there,"
Yeah.
So then let's get Ron, because he went down there and back, and he's still alive, right? And so they got Ron, and Ron went back in there and pulled the bodies out. That's what they said. I'm just listening to the conversation. Pretty fascinating. So
Okay,
whatever
so-
Ron found or saw and was able to get the artifact, when these other guys went in there, they didn't survive. Now, are they dead? I don't know. But they weren't conscious when he pulled them out of it.
This is the part. So this is where the story begins from, and I want you to continue with it. But this is where the story for most people begins to sound like, "Oh my gosh, can this possibly be true?" But it is. I guess it is what it is.
I don't really care either way. This is what they said.
Yes. So the story. Okay. So the story is they lock him. So he's at the hotel, and Israel tries to send military officers in. They die or they're unresponsive. They go get Ron. Ron crawls back in there. They're also they're Hebrew or they're Israeli, right?
Yeah,
So-
I don't know
so
who
they
the
go in
officers were.
So yeah, whatever the case, Ron crawled in there and he comes back okay, and Ron helps them pull bodies out of this room.
And then they sealed the place off, and he can't go back.
Is the story?
Yeah. Now, I don't recall that we went, that went any further. I don't know that he was allowed to do anything more. I think what had happened was, leave everything. You're done here, Ron. We're going to take it from here. We got, some things to take care of. And I think that stopped that whole thing. Years later, when I'm there with Richard and his friends and our volunteers and everything, his stuff is still down there. So they just went,
Oh, that's right. You were telling me where they. Okay, so
yeah.
So now, what happens to Ron? Okay, so he's helped in pulling several men out that are unconscious or maybe even dead. What happens following that, to the best of your knowledge?
Okay, so as time went on with this, if I recall, Ron started getting meetings or people with, I'm not going to say the CIA, I don't remember who it was, that wanted to meet with him, said, now what, and this, and tell me. And then soon after, he died of cancer. You heard of Kim Clement?
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at?
Ron
Isn't
did
that
die.
kind-
Ron did die not long after this, didn't he?
Why is that?
Yeah.
Why did Kim Clement do these
Yeah, this
prophecies?
is the last Lord's story, and Ron was very young.
Yeah. Why did Kim Clement do these prophecies and then some
That's I didn't
officers
even.
came-
I didn't even think about that before.
Think of that.
So
And
my
then another
understanding.
cancer thing.
My understanding about the story was after Ron was taken back to the hotel, they put him on an airplane. He was not allowed to go back to the site again. Put him
Right.
on an airplane. Shortly thereafter, they'd been denying they even heard of him at all, which is crazy because all the permissions he had to dig. That always shell-shocked me the most.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could say, yeah, we heard of the guy. He's telling a crazy story now. It's, we're not thrilled to have him back. But they didn't. They said, we don't know him at all.
Yeah. But when you actually meet with those staff years later, when we went back, they had a terrific relationship. They even let Richard go in there and ground scan the whole area again and look for that stone. Yeah. Didn't find the stone, but found that. And he's got samples of that material off that wall. He's also got samples of the material of the crack, what appears to be blood, around the crack of that cross hole.
In your opinion, Mike, do you think Ron found it?
I'll say this, everything that I heard about what he did matches what I saw. And I don't want to be mean. I don't want this to come across mean at all. I don't mean anything bad about it. I don't care what the truth is. I just want to know what it is.
Yeah.
And everything I found verifies what he said. I don't have any, there's no motivation to make up anything. It's just like, this is what I saw.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that was true.
And it could be true.
And absolutely could be true because it all matches what we actually saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. This guy had an amazing talent, being probably led spiritually to find a lot of terrific things. And the best the opponents to Ron Wyatt can do is just badmouth him that he's not a licensed archaeologist or he didn't get permits or whatever. And they completely ignore the things he was able to find.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you focused on that? Look at what the guy did.
The sites of Sodom and Gomorrah, which you walked me through, Mike, when I went to Israel for the first time. And in fact, what were the name of the labs where you did it?
Gallup
it's
Laboratories did the particle. This is what's pretty neat there. Okay, so, and I gave you a picture of these. These are actually just photographs, right,
Mm-hmm.
of stuff 20-some years ago. So you take a sample of the powder.
Mm-hmm.
You take some of the brimstone,
Mm-hmm.
which are in all practical purposes, I would say, is more of a meteorite. In other words, it's something that fell from the sky,
Mm-hmm.
was crazy hot, and burned everything so hot it actually burned the stone buildings.
Yeah.
So the Sodom and Gomorrah story is more about a giant missing persons story. So imagine there's a town that you live near, and you and your wife decide, hey, let's go over to such and such town. And you go there, and not only are the people gone,
Buildings are gone.
the whole town's gone. It's like, that's actually the Sodom and Gomorrah story.
Yeah.
Now, we also noticed at night, these little bitty deer would come to the site, and they're hoofing around and chunking up a piece of something, and they would lick on it. That's minerals.
Yeah.
Okay. Ground zero for the nuclear blast of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was the same chunks that they said was a person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was the first time I heard when I was talking to Richard of somatids, all right? So now this particular bone on both sides is probably where the most of your blood is actually produced by your body, in that marrow, right? Well, wouldn't it be interesting to know that your body is also producing something that never dies? And that's not me saying that. It's what real scientists say. Now, the earliest word of this is called somatids. In Greek, it means small bodies. So if you was to use a special microscope, which Richard has and built, a dark field microscope, you could actually see these little white little beings zipping around and fixing stuff compared to the big old blood cell.
Mhm.
And they morph into as many as, I think, 14 different types of organisms, depending on how and what type of stress your body is under. Okay, so they, like, if you're in good hands, good health and all this, they morph in a particular order in time where it's pretty much like electrician, carpenter, plumber, electrician, carpenter, plumber. And they morph into these three organisms when you're normal. And then they start morphing into something different to repair or take care of another
Nature.
thing. Okay. It's been proven that they cannot be killed. Okay. So remember, Moses said, was it Moses or Noah? One or the other, said, for the life is in the blood. Right? Don't eat blood. Why is he saying that? Because of people eating blood.
Right.
Don't do that. In fact, it's mentioned more than once, isn't it? There's some benefit people are getting from eating blood. He was saying, don't do it. But he said the life is in the blood. Well, if the largest number of organisms in your body is not the 7 trillion blood cells, but the 50 to 100 somatids for each blood cell that you have in your body, then the largest number of living organisms in any man or woman are those, and they never die. So that would mean that anybody that has ever died, their blood is still alive. That's pretty amazing. Remember when your brother's blood was calling to me from the ground?
Yeah.
Remember that?
In
So the animals in Sodom and Gomorrah are licking the blood out.
It's not the blood, no, it's the minerals.
Minerals,
You
yeah.
actually are turned to a pillar of salt.
Yeah.
But it's not, you don't have this much salt in your body, unless the whole thing's converted that way. Like, right. But a pillar is when you just, okay, so if I stack 3 or 4 rocks, nothing in the world does that except a human. So if you're trying to show what the border of your property is and you're walking along, you make a pile of rocks and anybody else go and say, oh, this is a borderline. This is a human had to do this. They don't stack themselves. So if I took salt crystals, which look like little cubes, and stack them up, that is a column, or a column of salt, right?
Yeah.
Well, something about as big as your fist is how much you would be if you were burned in the same area that is hot enough to burn the stone the city's made out of, and that's Sodom and Gomorrah. So here was the key of it. So Galbraith Laboratory said, here's the weird thing. We took just limestone that you found outside of the site and was able to find a lab who would burn it. And it's hard to do because you've got to ruin all your stuff trying to get hot enough to do that. And it did not match the powder in this site. You have to add some sulfur.
Yeah, and that's the Sodom and Gomorrah site.
Right.
And that's the site that Ron Wyatt is credited with discovering.
That's right. That's
the same,
right.
The same guy who would later come from, it's got sulfur balls that are all throughout
That's
the
right.
city. It's the
And
only
it's a
place in the world.
98% pure ball of sulfur.
Right, it's the only place in the world that's got those.
That's right, in that pureness.
And this is the same guy that came back from a plane flight from Israel saying, I found the Ark of the Covenant, and Israel's going to tell you about it in a little while. And instead of telling you about it, they denied that
He was even
he
there.
was in there. And you're telling me the tunnels are substantial enough to have had exactly those chambers in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And it does end up underneath where he said.
It goes
Or close.
right to it. Yeah. Now we couldn't go all the way.
Right.
I'm telling you straight up what it was. But we got pretty doggone close, and the trajectory was correct. And I think that's pretty.
I actually
doggone
doubted
impressive.
his story, and that's interesting, Mike. There's a man in Springfield doing something called and doing something called the Ark Movement,
Mhm.
and I was listening to him talk about Ron Wyatt, and that's why I asked you about it tonight,
Mhm.
and also because you were there with those people. You're one of the few people in the world that can actually tell that story.
So when you, I have a question about this.
Yeah.
So when you went there, both of you were there at Sodom and Gomorrah.
At different points, yeah.
Different
Mhm.
points,
Different
yeah.
points. So Lot and his daughters went out, and his wife
Oh, and went to his cave.
out of the city. Where is the cave?
The cave's not actually that far from there. It's a pretty good hike up the
found
hill.
it. Okay.
Yeah, and
So-
he had built this this pretty terrific water system to recoup the water and store it. It's a pretty impressive.
The cities,
site.
Dwayne, are like ash
Yeah.
that has a little structure to it.
But
And you
near
dig-
there
you
is
kind of dig
lots.
through it a little bit, and it's got little pellets of,
Yeah,
of balls
but
of
think
sulfur
about
in it.
this.
Yeah.
Okay, God comes to you. You're
Mhm.
living in the city with your family. God comes to you and says, "We're taking this baby out.
You gotta go.
I'd like you to go." Now, what you're describing is fire big enough, powerful enough that when you gotta go, you better go.
Yeah.
Okay, so it can't be close. Does that make sense?
Right.
That cave and where they went
No, you have to
can't
have
be
a distance.
close.
They actually watched everything burn from a distance and thought the earth was gone.
Right.
They're like,
The
okay, it's
whole
just me and
earth.
my daughters. There ain't no people.
There's nobody
around here."
left. The daughters thought that.
Right.
The dad was drunk.
That's right.
So the daughters
I
thought.
can see why he'd
"We're
want to
da-
drink something.
I can see
He lost,
that.
his,
Yeah,
he
like-
lost his wife and he lost his city.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it would drive
Yeah,
him
well, at
in.
least I got this.
It would
wine.
drive him in or walk him in to drink.
That's
in
right.
Those days.
Yeah,
He didn't
yeah.
get to drink.
Yeah, you.
But
Didn't have to worry about John.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Makes
see,
perfect sense.
the fire had to be so big.
Well, intense.
Not like
so
a
much
volcano. Not-
size,
I
but
mean,
yeah.
if you think of it in terms of a volcano, that's the nearest thing we would have to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was even bigger than that. And they had to be a fur piece from it
Mhm.
and up above so they could look down on it.
Mhm.
And think then that the whole world was gone.
Yeah, remember the shell of these meteorites are iron, titanium, and magnesium.
Yeah.
What, a melt temp 1300 degrees? Okay. If sulfur turns to a gas at 300 or 400 degrees, somewhere in there, how do you coat something that with that low of a melt temp with something that has a melt temp of 1200 degrees? That's what they're saying. I don't know how you would, it'd be like, can you metal coat chocolate
Yeah.
without just burning the chocolate up?
You're going to burn the chocolate.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I was at the site with a book written by Josephus, Flavius Josephus.
Mhm.
I'm at the site, it's in the evening, sun's getting ready to set, I'm looking down, and we opened some of these, and some of the meteorites, if you will, the brimstone, were broken open, and I have these yellow little balls of sulfur laying right here. And I got the book in my hand, and Josephus is writing saying, yeah, a group of, I guess, Roman officers were escorting some prisoners through, Sodom and Gomorrah, and they were like, kind of creeped out to be there. And he said, you remember that place, that city that our father had burned for its iniquities. For if you look down, you can grasp the fruit of the fire in your hand. And if you do, it turns to dust. And as I was reading that, I pick up what looks to be a lemon and do this, and it turns to dust in my hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was writing that when?
When's Flavius Josephus? That's
Josephus
way
was a Jewish
early.
historian.
Mhm.
Right.
But this has been a
1400s, I think.
This has been a presentation on the Ark of the Covenant with Mike Hughes. We're going to do some more interviews like this, and Mike is one of the few people in the world that could have done this talk about Ron Wyatt and the Ark of the Covenant, which at this point in history that needs to be found.
Yeah, it's just an amazing story.
Mike also produces a lot of things that have to do with health that I would highly recommend you look at. There'll be links for it here. Rocketman at GetRocketman.com. There's also my family members, Dwayne and Lisa. They run something called Bullet and Bruise, Dwayne and Lisa Winkler. And I just want to thank all of you for watching. And hopefully on this trip we're going to do some more interviews about some of these archaeological things and things that are happening in the nation. I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. Mike, thank you very much for
Not a problem.
for
A lot of fun.
sharing all of that tonight. I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. God bless every last one of you and your families on the other side of the screen.